Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Chris, and today we're diving into a super important topic, top 10 Kubernetes security best practices. Whether you're new to Kubernetes or already using it in production, security is something you can't ignore. The truth is, Kubernetes is powerful, but it can also be complex. That's why it's essential to follow best practices to keep your clusters safe and secure. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the top 10 ways you can secure your Kubernetes environment. From simple tips to advanced strategies, there's something here for everyone. So if you want to keep your clusters secure and learn how to protect your apps from potential risks, make sure you stick around till the end. And hey, if you like this content, hit that like button, subscribe, and let's get started. Alright, let's kick things off with our first best practice, role-based access control, or RBAC for short. So, what is RBAC and why does it matter? Well, the role-based access control basically allows you to define permissions for different users and groups in your Kubernetes cluster. This way, you ensure that each individual only has access to the resources they need based on their role. This is super important in maintaining a secure environment. In fact, we can define role-based access control as 4 key benefits. First, fine-grained control. This means you get to decide who can access specific resources like pods and deployments. For example, you can allow certain users to access only particular namespaces or limit access to just viewing logs without giving them the ability to change anything. Then we have the simplified administration, that managing permissions can get complicated quickly. Role-based access control makes life easier by letting you assign roles to groups of users instead of having to configure access for each person individually. This saves time and reduces the chance of mistakes. Other point it is enhanced security, that basically we can limiting what users can do. Role-based access control helps prevent unauthorized actions and minimizes security risks. For instance, you can make sure that only trusted users can make changes to critical configurations. And last but not least, the compliance. Many organizations have to meet specific security regulations. With role-based access control, you can control access in a way that aligns with these rules, ensuring that only approved individuals can access sensitive data. Implementing role-based access control is a foundational step to securing your Kubernetes environment. It helps keep your cluster safe by limiting access to only those who need it, and it makes managing permissions a lot more manageable. If you're not using role-based access control yet, well, you're definitely leaving your environment more vulnerable than it needs to be. Alright, next up, let's talk about enabling network policies. This is a super important step for controlling how traffic flows between different parts of your Kubernetes cluster. Think of it as setting up some basic rules for who's allowed to talk to whom inside your environment. So, why does this matter? Network policies help you in 3 main ways. First, network segmentation. Imagine dividing your Kubernetes cluster into separate zones like production, development, and any other critical services you run. By segmenting your network, you can isolate parts of the cluster from each other. This means that if something goes wrong in one area, like a security issue or unexpected bug, it won't spread throughout the entire system. Next, traffic filtering. With network policies, you can create rules that control which traffic is allowed to flow between different pods and services. You can block or allow traffic based on factors like the source, destination, or even the type of traffic. This is great for stopping unauthorized communication. For instance, you might want to make sure a database pod only accepts connections from certain application pods. Network policies give you that level of control. Finally, enforcing security policies. Network policies let you stop certain types of communication within your cluster, especially between different zones. This can be really helpful if you want to lock down access to sensitive services. It adds another layer of security and can also help your cluster meet various compliance standards. So not only are you boosting security, but you're also setting yourself up to meet any regulatory requirements that apply. To sum it up, enabling network policies might feel like extra work at first, but it's totally worth it for the added security and control. Instead of your Kubernetes cluster being an open highway for network traffic, it becomes more like a well-guarded neighborhood where only certain connections are allowed. Alright, with that covered, let's move on to the next best practice. Let's talk about namespaces and how they help keep things organized in Kubernetes. Namespaces let you split your Kubernetes cluster into smaller, separate parts. This means you can apply different security rules for each application or environment, like development, testing, or production. Imagine namespaces like different rooms in a house. Each room has its own purpose, but they're all part of the same house. Using namespaces gives you a few important benefits. First, keeping environments separate. Namespaces let you divide things up so your development, testing, and production environments don't affect each other. For example, if something breaks in your development space, it won't crash your live production system. This makes things more stable and safer to test. Second, controlling resources. With namespaces, you can limit how much CPU or memory each part of your system uses. This stops one team or app from taking up too much power, leaving enough resources for everything to run smoothly. Third, controlling access. Namespaces make it easier to set permissions, so only certain people or teams can make changes in each area. For example, you might only allow the production team to change things in the production namespace, adding an extra layer. And finally, controlling traffic. Namespaces can work with network policies to block unwanted traffic between different parts of your system. This is like putting walls between rooms so that only the right people or apps can move between them. For example, you can block the development environment from talking to the production database. To sum up, using namespaces helps keep everything organized, secure, and running smoothly. You can manage different apps and teams without them interfering with each other, just like keeping each task in its own room. Let's move on to the next best practice. Next up is the importance of limiting container privileges. One of the biggest security risks in Kubernetes is running containers with more privileges than they actually need. By keeping container permissions low, you can greatly reduce your security risks. Here are 4 best practices to follow. 1. Use non-root users. Always try to run containers as non-root users. Running as root gives a container too much control, and if it gets compromised, it could cause serious harm. For example, think of it like using a guest account on a computer instead of the administrator account. Less risk if something goes wrong. 2. Avoid privileged containers. Privileged containers have nearly full access to the host system, just like a root user. If someone hacks a privileged container, they could take over your entire Kubernetes cluster. To avoid this, only use privileged containers when it's absolutely necessary. 3. Set capability limits. Kubernetes allows you to control which specific actions or capabilities a container can perform. For example, if your app doesn't need to change network settings, you can block that capability. Use security context to enforce permission rules, like making sure the container runs as a non-root user, blocking privilege escalation, and dropping unneeded capabilities. This way, you make sure each container is running with the right level of access. By limiting container privileges, you reduce what an attacker can do if they manage to break into one of your containers. This simple step can make a huge difference in securing your Kubernetes cluster. So next, let's talk about an important step in securing your Kubernetes setup: scanning container images. Container images are how we package and deploy our applications, but if we're not careful, they can become a big security risk. So let's walk through a few simple ways to keep them safe. First, always use trusted registries. When you're pulling images, stick to well-known sources like Docker Hub, Google Container Registry, or Amazon ECR. Think of it like downloading apps on your phone. You wouldn't just download from any random website, right? These trusted platforms have better security checks, so you're less likely to get an image with hidden malicious code, and whenever possible, use images from verified publishers, just like how you'd trust apps from big known companies over unknown ones. Second, make it a habit to scan your images regularly. This is super important because it helps you spot any vulnerabilities before they can become a problem. You can use tools like Trivy, Claire, or Anchor to automatically scan your images and flag any potential security issues. For example, imagine you've built an app and included an old version of a library that has known vulnerabilities. Scanning will catch that and give you the chance to fix it before deploying. Third, sign your images. This means adding a digital signature to confirm that the image hasn't been tampered with. It's like sealing a letter. You know it's safe and unchanged when it arrives. If someone tries to sneak malicious code into your image after it's built, the signature would alert you. This step is key to preventing supply chain attacks, where bad actors try to mess with your images as they move between stages. Finally, minimize your image size. Use smaller base images like DistroLess or Alpine and remove any files or libraries you don't need. For instance, if your application doesn't need certain tools or libraries, don't include them. The less you bring, the easier it is to manage and secure. By following these best practices, you're making sure that the images you deploy are as secure as they can be. It's all about building a strong foundation and reducing the chances of vulnerabilities hiding inside your containers. Alright, now let's talk about secrets management. Basically, how we handle sensitive information like passwords, API keys, and tokens in Kubernetes. It's super important to keep your secrets safe, and there are 3 main practices to focus on. First, secure storage. You always want to store sensitive data in an encrypted and secure format. Think of it like locking your valuables in a safe, rather than leaving them out in the open. Tools like HashiCorp Vault or AWS Secrets Manager are great for this. They help manage and encrypt your secrets so that only those who really need access can get to them. For example, if you're storing a database password, these tools will keep it safe and make sure unauthorized users can't see it. Second, access control. You can use it to control who has permission to view or change your secrets. You can allow only your application to access a specific API key while preventing other services from touching it. Third, secrets rotation. This is a fancy way of saying you need to regularly update your secrets, like changing passwords, API keys, or tokens on a schedule. This helps reduce the risk of someone misusing a secret if it somehow gets leaked. For example, if an API key is accidentally exposed, rotating that secret ensures it becomes useless quickly. Automation tools can help here, making sure the process is smooth and you don't have to do it all manually. By following these practices, you make sure your secrets stay safe and protected throughout their entire lifecycle. Good secrets management is key to keeping your Kubernetes environment secure, preventing potential leaks or breaches. Alright, moving on, let's talk about audit logs and why they're essential for maintaining security in your Kubernetes environment. Audit logs are like the security cameras of your cluster. They track everything that happens inside, giving you a record of every action. This makes it easier to spot suspicious activities and make sure your security policies are being followed. Here's how you can use audit logs effectively. First, vulnerability scanning. Regularly scanning your logs can help you catch security threats early. For example, logs can reveal unusual patterns or anomalies like repeated failed login attempts, which might indicate a vulnerability or even an ongoing attack. Tools like Prometheus, Grafana, and the ELK stack can automate this for you, making it easier to stay on top of potential risks without having to dig through the logs manually. Second, security audits. Audit logs allow you to monitor for suspicious activities and ensure compliance with your security policies. For instance, you can track who accessed specific resources, when they did it, and whether someone tried to perform unauthorized actions. This helps you respond quickly to potential security breaches. Think of it like checking the logbook of a secured building. You can see who's been where and whether everything is in order. Third, patch management. Audit logs can also help with keeping your system up to date. You can monitor whether critical updates or patches are being applied across your cluster. If something isn't updated properly, the logs can point out what went wrong and where the gaps are, so you can fix them quickly. By setting up solid logging and monitoring solutions, you get full visibility into what's going on inside your Kubernetes cluster. This kind of visibility is essential for detecting issues early and responding before they become bigger problems. Being proactive with audit logs is a big step toward building a secure and resilient Kubernetes environment. Next up, let's highlight a fundamental yet crucial best practice: keeping your Kubernetes clusters up to date. Regular updates are vital for securing your environment, including the control plane, nodes, and plugins. Here's why staying current matters. First, vulnerability scanning. Regularly scan your cluster for known vulnerabilities using tools like Claire or Trivy. These tools help identify outdated components that might pose a security risk, ensuring that your environment stays protected. Second, security audits. Conduct regular audits to assess the security of your Kubernetes cluster. These audits help you understand where your system might be exposed, allowing you to address potential issues before they escalate. Finally, patch management. Staying up to date with security patches for both Kubernetes and any third-party software is essential. New vulnerabilities are discovered frequently, and promptly applying patches ensures your environment remains resilient against the latest threats. This applies not just to Kubernetes itself, but also to all the tools and applications running within the cluster. By keeping your cluster updated, you're taking a proactive approach to minimize risks and ensure your Kubernetes environment remains secure. It's a small habit that can make a big difference over time. After discussing the importance of keeping your clusters up to date, it's equally essential to ensure that your individual pods are set up securely. Pod security contexts allow you to define key security settings, such as user permissions, control over capabilities, and restricting access to certain features. This way, you have more control over how each pod interacts with the underlying host and other resources, keeping everything safe and consistent. Here's how to make the most of pod security contexts. First, vulnerability scanning. Just as you do with the rest of your cluster, regularly scan your pods for known vulnerabilities. Using tools like Claire and Trivy can help you catch potential security issues early, ensuring your pods are configured securely. Second, security audits. Conduct regular audits of your pod security contexts. Make sure that pods aren't running as root unless it's absolutely necessary, and limit their permissions. These checks can help you catch misconfigurations that might turn into security risks down the line. Finally, patch management. Keeping your pods updated is just as important as maintaining your cluster. Apply the latest security patches to both Kubernetes and any third-party software your pods rely on, so they stay protected against new vulnerabilities. By implementing proper security contexts, you set the right guardrails for a consistent and secure environment across your entire Kubernetes setup. It's all about having a solid foundation, ensuring that your applications run safely and securely. To round off our top 10 Kubernetes security best practices, let's talk about monitoring and alerting, essential for a secure Kubernetes environment. Continuous monitoring helps you stay on top of what's happening in your cluster, so you can catch any unusual behavior early. Here's how to do it effectively. First, network monitoring. Keep an eye on your network traffic for unexpected patterns, like sudden spikes or unusual connections. For example, if a service that normally has light traffic suddenly sees a huge surge, it could be a sign of an issue that needs your attention. Second, log analysis. Regularly review logs to spot suspicious activity, such as repeated failed login attempts or unexpected restarts. For instance, if a pod keeps crashing and restarting, your logs can help pinpoint what's going wrong so you can fix it quickly. Setting up alerts ensures you don't miss these warning signs. Third, event correlation. Connect different events across your system to spot patterns. For example, a failed login attempt followed by a spike in outbound traffic might indicate an attempted breach. Correlating these events helps you catch security issues faster. Finally, vulnerability assessment. Regularly scan for weaknesses and apply updates promptly. For instance, if a new security patch is released for a container image you use, update it right away to protect your environment from known vulnerabilities. Effective monitoring and alerting help you catch problems early, keeping your Kubernetes cluster secure and running smoothly. Alright, let's quickly recap the top 10 best practices for securing your Kubernetes clusters. We've covered a lot today, so let's go over the key takeaways one more time. First, RBAC. Set up strong access controls so that only the right people have access to specific resources. Next, network policies. Control the flow of traffic between resources to add isolation and security. Next, container privileges. Avoid running containers as root and always scan for vulnerabilities. It's a simple step that goes a long way. Namespaces. Keep things organized by using namespaces to separate environments like development, staging, and production. Regularly scan your images, and don't forget to encrypt sensitive data to minimize risks. Manage secrets. Use tools like HashiCorp Vault to securely store and regularly rotate your secrets. It's all about keeping those keys safe. Monitor your logs, set up alerts, and conduct regular audits to catch any suspicious activities. Pod security. Apply security context to manage pod behavior and limit risks. Every little setting counts. Monitoring and alerting, continuously track your cluster's health and be ready to act fast if something looks off. And finally, keep up to date. Regularly apply patches and updates to stay protected against new threats. This is one of the easiest ways to keep your environment secure. By following these best practices, you're building a secure, resilient Kubernetes environment that's ready for anything. Thanks so much for sticking with me. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. See you in the next one.